This is a video of a presentation from the ISSW 2013 in Grenoble, France. Alan Jones is an avalanche consultant, and I'm an avalanche researcher who does some consulting. I'm going to talk about applying ISO 31000 to avalanche mitigation projects, and this is just first impressions. Neither of us are authorities on ISO 31000. There are three parts to this talk. First, we'll present the ISO 31000 risk management standard, just a quick overview of it. Then we'll apply it to a hypothetical case study involving a haul road to a new mine. And last, we'll look at an existing risk management process for roads and see how it compares to ISO 31000. And this is just first impressions only. So ISO is the International Standards Organization, and they're based in Geneva. They're the world's largest developer of voluntary international standards. ISO 31000 was published in 2009 based on a working group from 29 countries, most of whom ratified and agreed to this risk management standard. It's not certifiable like ISO 9000, but it does provide guidance on best practice. The goal is to achieve consistency and reliability in risk management by creating a standard that would be applicable to a wide variety of forms of risk. It's really quite a general, an umbrella standard, and it leaves lots of room for more specific standards to be developed underneath it. To date, there are 3 documents published for the ISO 31000 risk management standard. There's the principles. There are the principles and guidelines, the risk assessment techniques, and an implementation guide, and you can download these for a fee. This talk is just an overview on ISO 31000, and these documents are a good starting point to learn more about ISO 31000. In our traditional definition of risk that we've used in natural hazards, we combine the probability and severity of an adverse effect on health, property, or the environment. In ISO 31000, we define risk as the effect of uncertainty on our objectives. So we have a very different definition of risk, and that changes a lot of things. In ISO 31000, uncertainty arises from the factors that an organization doesn't control, but that may cause an organization to be late in achieving its objectives or fail to achieve its objectives. Risk is neither positive to negative. The consequences, that is the effect on our objectives, may vary from loss and detriment to gain and benefit. Some of the new things with ISO 31000, well, we have this new definition of risk, which is quite an important change. And it provides one vocabulary for all organizations and departments. So this is pretty advantageous if we can talk the same language up and down through an organization, across departments, have the same language when we're talking to the lawyers, the insurers, the board of directors, etc. ISO requires that there's a clearly defined risk owner to take ownership of risk. And the emphasis is now on our new definition of risk on the positive and negative effects on our organizational objectives. And so risk treatment is concerned with achieving a net increase in benefit. So here's the ISO 31000 risk management process. First, you establish the context. You identify the risks, analyze the risks, evaluate them against some external level, and then you can continue to treat the risks, or if the evaluation suggests the risks are not in the right range, you can cycle back through, make changes, re-identify the risks, analyze it, and again, until finally you come up with your risk treatment. Now we're going to apply these stages to a hypothetical mining road to a new mine, in which the mine is off this side and the smelter and the worker housing is off to this side. So the haul trucks as well as the miners have to travel back and forth on this road, which is exposed to avalanches. So in our context here, we've got this new mine, we've got the haul road, and only the haul road is exposed to avalanches. The mining at it, etc. Service buildings are not exposed to avalanches. Our context includes the number of trucks per day, the number of workers traveling on it, their day miners, the haul trucks. Everything needs to be considered as to what's exposed. And everything is going to be assessed here in terms of the mining company's objectives, so they must be clearly identified. In that case, it's profit, positive relations with the workers and the communities, and environmental stewardship. When we identify the risks, there's a long list of risks that need to be considered as coming out of our stakeholder consultation. The ones at the top in blue most relate to the avalanches. That is worker safety, reputation, legal liability, the avalanche protection for the road. Some of these have highly uncertain. You don't know whether the costs are going to be large or small related to them. Therefore, they're considered risks. We also have insurance and labor, as well as ore prices, which can fluctuate, and financial returns from the other mine that could affect the mining company's objectives. Here we're going to concentrate on the top 4 in blue because they most directly relate to avalanches. The avalanche consultant comes up with a cost-benefit analysis of 2 options. The benefit being risk reduction, because that affects the organizational objectives. The consultant comes up with 2 risk matrices, one for the outset risk before mitigation and one for the residual risk after mitigation. These bear some similarities to an analysis of event risk, but under ISO 31000, everything must be related to the organizational objectives. So if a size D1 avalanche had no effect on the organizational objectives, it would be not considered. If a size D4 and D5 avalanches had the same effect on organizational objectives, they would be grouped together for the analysis. And the consultant comes back to the mining company recommending a combination of a deflection dike for the really busy path that's going to hit the road most frequently, and a small forecasting and control program for the other paths. As is all too common, the mining company rejects the recommendation because they realize that the deflection dike is going to seriously affect the creek, and fish habitat is protected in many jurisdictions. So the organizational objective was not reflected in the contract terms. These intangibles that were intangible to the avalanche consultants have been written about going as far back as Peter Scherer in the 1960s. So they're very well known. We have 2 options to solve this issue. 1, the avalanche consultant could work more closely with the management team. 2, the contract could be broadened to include environmental issues. In ISO 31000 is certainly too general to specify which of these to be taken. So we go back out to the avalanche consultant for a second contract, and he comes back recommending a major forecasting control program without a deflection dike. Our risk treatment, and again things are related to the organizational objectives here, is we have a more major forecasting control program without a dike. We have an expanded worker safety program because the workers are exposed to the road. We have an expanded insurance coverage, including the cost of delayed ore shipments. If there's long closures on the road, this insurance coverage could be quite valuable. An expanded legal services contract, and an expanded community relations program because, for example, if there's a closure late in the day, the workers might be up at the mine overnight, and you need to communicate with the families and the communities about the closure. So in part 3 of this talk, we'll look at how this is different from a traditional risk management for an avalanche-prone road. Here we see a flowchart developed by Stefan Margrethe and colleagues in 2003. This is a full flowchart. It's quite specific. First, we define our problem. We look at the winter conditions, including the number of vehicles on the road. And then we look at the avalanches, the paths, their frequency that they hit the road. Then initially, before we do any mitigation, we analyze the risks, and we see if that's acceptable. If the risk is acceptable, we're done. If not, we need to propose a mitigation plan, look at its effectiveness, and reassess here. At this time, we're going to come back through. We've got our mitigation plan, and we come into our risk analysis, and we can cycle through in here until we come up with effective mitigation and the risk is acceptable, and then we can go ahead and implement our mitigation. ISO 31000 changes first and foremost some terminology that is obvious here. These first 2 boxes fall under establishing the context. This box here is considered risk identification. No change in terminology for the risk analysis. Here's the risk evaluation here. And then the mitigation plan is an optional risk treatment. We're going to review that and come back through and reassess and cycle through here until finally we come up with our final risk treatment in which the risk is acceptable. So you notice 2 things here. First, this is a very specific risk mitigation, whereas ISO 31000 is quite general and broad. And second, we have some new terminology here. So in summary, ISO 31000 gives us a general framework for diverse organizations and projects to manage their risk. We have a new definition of risks, which has quite important changes that can have positive or negative effects on the organizational objectives. We have new terminology. Already in Canada, we're finding it's popular with financial institutions, boards of directors, upper level management, and in time that will hopefully trickle down to the frontline managers and workers. ISO 31000 is not without its detractors. Grant Purdy, in an 2010 article in the Risk Analysis Journal, points out that some worker safety organizations have questioned why worker safety and achieving zero risk to workers is not the ultimate goal in ISO 31000. But in fact, ISO 31000 is very broad, and it allows individual organizations to apply whatever objectives is appropriate to their circumstance. So the impression that Alan and I have is that ISO 31000 works for avalanche mitigation projects, but it's just a broad general framework for risk management that leaves lots of room for more specific risk management standards to be developed underneath it. It provides consistent terminology that can be used throughout an organization and requires that a risk owner be clearly identified, so it has a number of advantages. Thank you.